Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Paris Schutz has the evening off. On the show tonight,
it's about groceries, gasoline, and property taxes.
Details on a new tax relief plan and whether families will feel the difference.
I'm not trying to promote misinformation. I'm not trying to be controversial.
A Chicago epidemiologist calls out podcaster Joe Rogan as a, quote, menace to public health for spreading vaccine misinformation.
That person will be the first black woman ever nominated to the United States Supreme Court.
Reaction to President Biden's promise for the next Supreme Court nomination. Jason Van Dyke is set to be released from prison Thursday, but calls for federal charges against the ex-police officer are growing. Negotiations over Chicago's new ward map still at a roadblock. We have the latest.
See investment as well as a great workforce that is ready, willing, and able to make businesses successful here in the city of Chicago.
South and West Side businesses will soon receive millions in city funding. Deerfield-based Walgreens begins taking bids on its international drugstore chain. That and other business news from Cranes.
People's minds aren't going to be changed in silence.
And how a local street artist is encouraging mindfulness with phrases people may be thinking, but no one is saying. But first, some of today's top stories. Mayor Lori Lightfoot is doubling down on her support of Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown. This, as the department has been slow to implement police reforms in the wake of Laquan McDonald's murder by former Chicago police officer Jason Van Dyke, who's scheduled to be released from prison this week. The mayor says change is hard under the federal consent decree and that it's not a failure of leadership.
We are on the right path. We are moving forward in the right way. We've got the right leader in the Chicago Police Department to keep pushing these initiatives forward. But we can't just wallow in the critics and the criticism because we are doing great things in our city.
And we'll hear from local activists with their take on Van Dyke's release later in the program. The Bears' new coach and general manager met the media today. Coach Matt Eberflus and GM Ryan Poles struck all the right notes during their first public appearance as Bears.
To the Chicago Bears players and fans, okay, we will play at a high tempo, a high effort, attacking physical style built upon speed, quickness, and explosive athletic ability.
And we're going to consistently put players in position to succeed. And the last thing, the most important piece, is we're going to take the North and never give it back.
The first Omicron BA2 subvariant has been detected in Illinois, and researchers believe that it is even more transmissible than the Omicron variant. They say, though, that doesn't necessarily mean it's more dangerous. Meanwhile, state health officials report more than 6,600 new COVID cases, along with 30 additional deaths. The statewide 7-day test positivity rate is just over 9%, down from 12% on Friday. As lawmakers head back to Springfield for the legislative session, one state senator wants to help families whose children are killed by gun violence. State Senator Jacqueline Collins wants the state to provide up to $10,000 for funeral and burial expenses. This fund would cover kids under 17 who die of gun violence and whose family's annual income is less than $40,000. There's already state funding to help victims of gun violence, but families have to pay upfront and then apply to be reimbursed. Up next, Amanda Vinicky with what more to expect as lawmakers head back to Springfield this week. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Governor J.B. Pritzker is back to giving an in-person speech about his budget and his vision for the state. Last year, he made a virtual address without an audience. Today, Pritzker's office is sharing some details about what will be included this week. Amanda Vinicky is in the capital city with a preview. Amanda.
Yeah, Brandis, that Omicron variant, plus, frankly, politicians gathering petition signatures for their upcoming races, that led to really all but one of the session days being canceled so far for 2022, but the legislature is supposed to be back starting tomorrow, and then there will be a joint session of the House and Senate on Wednesday, and that's when Governor J.B. Pritzker will be able to make use of the bully pulpit when he gives a joint State of the State and a budget address. Now, even in the worst of times, governors, really all politicians, try to put as positive a spin as possible on the budget picture. That has been, of course, a difficult thing to do here in Illinois. This year, the governor's office sounding downright rosy about its projections. While the pandemic has, of course, caused a lot of pain, governors across the country have benefited from federal dollars for COVID relief to get through all of that. And given that Illinois is one of the more populous states, Illinois has received far more than most states in that federal money. Now, in part because of the COVID stimulus federal relief, well, the nation is now grappling with inflation, and Governor Pritzker's office knows it. Andy Minar is the deputy governor for economy and the budget.
So those three things combined are what the governor is proposing to the legislature that we have a robust discussion about, and that's tackling the impact that inflation is having on working families across the state. Again, it's about groceries, gasoline, and property taxes.
Now let's pick that apart some. Pritzker plans to knock out a 1% sales tax on food come the new fiscal year that begins in July. And that would come at a savings to taxpayers of about $360 million. Of course, savings to taxpayers on the grocery tax doesn't mean free. It's money that Illinois government would typically be taking. So that 1% so-called holiday lasting 1 year, then to be tacked back onto your grocery bill. It is similar for their other two pieces of the so-called family relief proposal. They would be temporary. So take the gas tax. It's tough to get politicians to raise taxes. So in 2019, when Illinois doubled to 39 cents a gallon the tax on gasoline to pay for road and other construction, they decided to make life easier on their future selves by tying it to the consumer price index. Pritzker wants to temporarily suspend that. Minar says that would save drivers about 2 to 3 cents a gallon.
The governor understands that inflation is real and that it's eating into the pocketbooks of working families in the state. So when the bill was enacted several years ago, I don't think too many people ever dreamed that we would be facing the situation that we're facing today. So the governor's proposing that we pause that for a year. He thinks it's reasonable to take a step back.
Last but not least, property taxes, the bane of many a homeowner's budget. Pritzker wants to give homeowners a one-time property tax rebate to a max of $300, and that would save them, cost the state, nearly $500 million. Property tax reform has long plagued Illinois. There have been task forces, commissions, research papers. The legislature currently has committees devoted to it, but it has not really been tackled in a fulsome fashion. So I asked Minar, why not do something permanent? And here's a portion of his response.
It's something that can be implemented relatively quickly, we believe. We also think that it impacts as many people as we can seek to impact in the coming fiscal year. So you're right, Amanda, it is a 1 year proposal, but it also seeks to bring relief as quickly as possible.
Critics are eager to point out something inescapable about these one-time favors, that they are coming in an election year with a robust crew of Republicans eager to take on Governor Pritzker in that general election. So we'll learn more, speaking of eager, about these proposals in coming days. With that, back to you, Brandis.
Amanda, looking forward to hearing those. Thank you. A local epidemiologist is among 270 public health specialists and doctors who are calling out music streaming platform Spotify and its most successful podcaster for spreading COVID-19 vaccine misinformation. Styling herself as Dr. Cat on social media, UIC epidemiologist Katrine Wallace has made it her mission to combat potentially deadly fallacies about COVID-19 vaccines. Here's a little of Wallace in action on TikTok.
Let's go.
And joining us now is Katrine Wallace, who has a PhD in epidemiology. Dr. Kat, thank you for joining us. As we mentioned, you were one of 270 doctors, public health professionals to send an open letter to Spotify about Joe Rogan's podcast and what he and his guests have been saying about the vaccine. What might people hear on the Rogan podcast that concerns you?
We were very concerned about some of the misinformation that was being spread on his large platform. Some examples would be that young people should not get vaccinated, or that the vaccines cause toxic spike proteins that cause organ damage. Also advocating for the use of ivermectin despite CDC and FDA warnings against its use. So none of those things are good to be having on a platform streaming to 11 million subscribers.
So Joe Rogan, he posted a message on social media yesterday addressing this controversy. Here's a little bit of what he said.
I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I'm just a person who sits down and talks to people and has conversations with them. If there's anything that I've done that I could do better is have more experts with differing opinions right after I have the controversial ones. Again, I'm not trying to promote misinformation. I'm not trying to be controversial.
Dr. Kat, Rogan said that he's open to doing more mainstream experts, to booking them on his show, in addition to some of the controversial guests. Is that enough in your eyes?
See, when you have misinformation on a platform of that size, it causes a false balance where it looks like there's two sides to the scientific data, when in actuality, there really is not. The overwhelming evidence is that the vaccines are safe and effective, and they're saving lives during a pandemic. And we're in a global health emergency. So Spotify really needs to they have a responsibility to the public not to make this problem any worse.
So Spotify, taking a lot of criticism here. Neil Young and Joni Mitchell ordering the company to drop their music from the streaming platform. Their argument being that they're just a platform and they don't want to be in the business of censoring content. What's your response when they make that argument?
Well, just what I said is that when you have a large platform like that was letting information run unchecked, like I was saying at the beginning, that the vaccine causes toxic spike proteins that cause organ damage. We know after billions of people have taken the vaccine that that's not happening. So that is absolutely misinformation and should not be on a platform like that, on any platform. And if you promote misinformation like that on a large platform, I believe there should be some kind of strikes or something that happens against your account. Like they did, YouTube did this when Dan Bongino from a Fox News anchor was talking about how masks didn't work. They gave him a warning, and then he kept doing it, and now he's lost his platform. And I'm not saying I'm advocating for people to lose their platform or that I'm advocating for censorship, but people need to understand there's a difference between opinions and things that we absolutely have data to support, and the science is settled on that. So the science is not an opinion. There are things that we absolutely know are true, and some of these things are just not opinions.
Now, Spotify's CEO, they said in a statement, quote, "We know we have a critical role to play in supporting creator expression while balancing it with the safety of our users. In that role, it is important to me that we don't take on the position of being content censor." The company also promises they'll add content advisories and direct folks to their COVID-19 hub so they can get some credible information. But you've been waging war on vaccine misinformation for quite some time on TikTok. Tell us about that.
Yes, and I believe that content advisory statement is kind of more spectacle than substance, and it sort of adds to the false balance problem, right? Because they're just going to slap that label on anything that has COVID-19, even if it's from the WHO or something, versus something that's misinformation. So it doesn't really solve the problem. It's sort of just something that they're saying that they're doing, but it really isn't doing much. But yes, I've been fighting misinformation on social media. I started at the beginning of the pandemic, kind of downloaded TikTok for the same reason everybody else did. I was bored during the lockdown and I just wanted to have some entertainment. And in addition to seeing videos of people's dogs and cooking videos, I was also unfortunately seeing a lot of COVID-19 misinformation. So as an epidemiologist who understands the data, I decided to start making my own videos so I could be kind of a liaison between the scientific literature and lay people, because there seemed to be a lot of misinformation and confusion about what was real and what was fake news or misinformation.
And before we let you go, Dr. Kat, I was looking at your recent TikTok where obviously you're getting some responses from fans of Joe Rogan, upset with your criticism. Briefly, do you worry about being a high-profile critic of his? How's that affecting you?
I don't, because actually I feel like I know what I'm doing is right because I have the data and the evidence on my side, and I'm doing what I can for public health. And quite frankly, this is what I trained for, to advocate for public health.
Okay. Dr. Kat, be safe out there, and thank you for joining us. President Joe Biden says he intends to keep his campaign trail promise to nominate a black woman to the Supreme Court and should announce his pick by the end of February. Now, of course, a number of names have already been named to the proverbial shortlist, and if one of them is confirmed by the Senate, she would make history as the first black woman to serve on the highest court. Joining us to talk about this and more are Sadale Malaku, an assistant professor of management at Baruch College and author of, quote, "You Don't Look Like a Lawyer, Black Women and Systemic Gendered Racism." Corey Carew, Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer at Seyfarth Shaw, and Audra Wilson, President and CEO of the Shriver Center on Poverty Law. Thanks to you all for joining us. Sadale, let's start with you, please. What does this promise mean in a legal world that we know is statistically mostly male and white?
This is such an important moment for us. To have a black woman sit on the Supreme Court is to publicly say that we have been excluded, right? And to provide access, opportunity for other women, and specifically black women, to enter into this space. I think Biden is making a bold move here, but one that should have been done decades ago, right? And we see this in terms of what he's done previously to elevate black women within the court. So I think that we need to continue to be supportive and vocal about what this means with respect to black women's access to opportunity.
Audra Wilson, what's your reaction to this promise?
Same as Sadale. I think it's long overdue. There have been milestones that have been met, even having a black male, but to be going this long before we've had a black woman appointed to me is unconscionable. But what I'm happy to see is not only that President Biden has made this decision to make this nomination, but to see just the depth that he has to choose from. The people who are on the short list are formidable, and it's so exciting and wonderful to see, and it's important for our nation to see just how rich the pool of jurists, especially of black female jurists, there are to be selected.
Corey, talk to us a bit about some of the, the systemic and structural obstacles that black women face in the legal industry.
Thank you. That's an excellent question because, obviously that's part of why this moment is so incredible. Black women face a lot of obstacles in the legal profession. We often talk about this concept of intersectionality and how for black women, the gender obstacles are not just gender plus race, but there's this double whammy that has an exponential impact on their careers, whether it's the impact of bias, the lack of sponsorship, the lack of mentorship, the lack of opportunities and visibility to those developmentally rich opportunities that allow them to thrive and move within our organizations, the lack of a sense of belonging and inclusion. All of these are factors that impact the progress of Black women in the legal profession and the movement that we see away from law firms into the public sector, into government, into nonprofit, and even to the corporate sector where our clients are. So those are just some of the obstacles that Black women face, but incredibly, they continue to persevere, in comparison to a lot of other demographics that leave the practice of law when they face gender obstacles. Black women tend to remain in the profession, even if they move out of law firms.
Audra, Corey, I think just kind of mentioned this a little bit, but talk to us about the importance of mentorship in this industry. Audra?
Mentorship is critical. I'll go first.
Go ahead.
Right. Here's a common statement. We are over-mentored and under-sponsored. So quite frankly, mentorship and the lack of mentorship is an obstacle for Black women. However, even when we are mentored, we don't have that sponsorship. And the sponsorship is the key component to success, where there are people with influence and relational capital that can talk about you, can recommend you, can mention your name in the rooms where you cannot be in. And that is a key part of advancement for everyone. And Black women tend to not have enough sponsorship within their organizations. Audra, what would you add?
I would agree with that wholeheartedly, that it has to be about that sponsorship. The other thing that I was very concerned about in my past life, I was actually Director of Diversity, Education, and Outreach at Northwestern Law. And one of the things that I focused on there was really, when we talk about pipeline, it's not just about attracting and getting more people of color, and whether it's Black women, Black males, any sort of people of color, but supporting them all the way through law school, making sure that they're able to pass the bar, and then establishing a pipeline for them, whether they're going to firms or different tracks. As we've talked about, it's not exclusively a firm track. And it's that sort of support that is really integral to their success, because this is not just a numbers game of having more people of color to occupy traditionally homogenous spaces, but making sure that we're meaningfully integrated. So we need that support. And I'll use the word mentorship in this sense, more so than any other group, because if without that, people will fall off and they won't be able to make it through. So that is something that I think is very important, that we're thinking about mentorship in a much broader context. And it starts from very early on, and it lasts even once people have passed the bar and they're beginning to practice.
Sadale, whoever his pick should be for the nomination, what kind of path to confirmation do you expect for her?
I think that, like all things, and with respect to Black women in particular in white space, right, there's definitely going to be a lot of challenges ahead. And as Corey and Audra have mentioned, we're looking at various obstacles that Black women are having to mitigate within organizations, whether that's appearance, right? Looking professional, being perceived as professional competence, right? The idea that many of the nominees are currently having to battle narratives around their accomplishments, right? Whether they're good enough and what that actually looks like in terms of how they're going to be able to do the work that's necessary, right? So I think a lot of the women, whoever ends up in this space in particular, is going to face challenges that they have always been facing. It's not going to be new. It's going to be even more difficult, I believe, in those spaces to do the hard work that they've already been doing. But I think just with respect to that sponsorship, right? Being sponsored in this way is what is going to give them the power to be able to do their work to the best of their ability with the support that they need. And no matter where they end up, any of these amazingly credentialed women, right, hands down, they are going to have the support of so many professionals of all races who are looking specifically to see this happen, right? And I think we need to think about that as well.
Audra, some of the criticism, from the right has been that this is another form of affirmative action. What's your reaction to that?
So, Brenda, I will tell you unequivocally that I think that is extraordinarily offensive. One of the most difficult things about hearing this announcement from President Biden and wanting to support a Black woman was this proclamation that, I'm appointing a Black woman, because there were some people out there who thought, well, it automatically presumed that there is a question of qualifications. Does this person belong? Are we giving a handout to someone who wouldn't otherwise be deserving? The fact that we're not even given the benefit of the doubt, that the president would not make a nomination of someone who was more than worthy. If you look at the credentials of many of the women on this, actually all of the women, quite frankly, on this short list, they, quite frankly, outrival that of many of their white counterparts. They are stellar. And yet and still, there is a presumption that when the president says, I would like to rectify this wrong and have this representation on the court, that people automatically default to a place of somehow they didn't belong in the first place. So it is extraordinarily offensive. And I think it needs to be called out for what it is, and it is racist.
Okay, something that we'll all keep an eye out over the next month as we await the president's decision. Until then, my thanks to Sadale Malaku, Corey Carew, and Audra Wilson for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, a local artist attempts to paint what everyone is thinking about but isn't saying. We explain right after this.
I come from a people that not only found a way to survive through the most horrific circumstances, but they thrived.
I could not save one of the boys of color in my own life. If my family could be exposed to this horror, then really it could happen to anyone. We are truly all in this together.
And there's much more ahead on the program, including a look at a winning proposal in the city's Invest Southwest initiative. But first, you think it, he paints it. That's essentially the premise of a local street artist's work, to paint what everyone's thinking but isn't saying. Arts correspondent Angel Ito introduces us to Leon Thotsky.
Have you ever seen a produce sign in a grocery store or produce market, but mixed in with sardonic quips or reflections?
By sardonic quips, he means buzzwords that have the potential to get a rise out of people. But that isn't the intent of street artist Leon Thotsky's work.
I reflect on behavior that I see, and then I abstract the circumstance out of it, and then it gets almost to like a logic that when you express, it becomes very clear, and when people see it, it gives them pause, and they would then reflect on their own logic and their own actions and behavior.
In other words, he's saying what everyone's thinking, but isn't saying.
It has a sentiment of irony that might be lost on some people. I think that the style, though, is so absurd that people generally know right away that something's not right in the, in the situation or the piece. So it'll at least give cause for reflection.
The purpose of a dialogue is to change the other person's mind. If I can't find an enemy, I just expand the criteria. Opium is the religion of the masses. These are some of the phrases that came to Thotsky's mind during the lockdown, and when it came time to go outside again, he hit the streets with the sardonic quips in tow.
I do want people to be a little unnerved. I think it's like, just from my perspective, people's behavior and actions as of late have been sort of chaotic and sort of challenging to watch.
While the artist behind Leon Thotsky intends to remain a mystery, it doesn't mean he's absolved from his alter artist ego's encouragement for self-reflection.
He is sort of a persona that I guess is like loud and bold, and that's not necessarily who I am. I think I'm a little more quiet and introspective. So it's nice to be able to, I guess, hide behind that alter identity and just let Leon Thotsky go. It was for me to work on my own self and my own behavior. I do try to take these to heart. I don't think anyone can get out of these ideas or concepts. But it's good to be aware of them and sort of to check yourself and check how you affect others and how others are affecting other people, and just to be more aware.
This end goal has proven to be true.
People have reached out to me and said, this is something I didn't even know about myself, but when I saw it, it correlated with something that I do, and so now I'm rethinking about how I think and see the world.
While the purpose of Thotsky's work is to encourage self-reflection and growth, it's also meant to serve as a reminder.
It's better for people's ideas and opinions to be out in the light. Even if they're bad, we have to take them up and talk about them. People's minds aren't going to be changed in silence. We need dialogue.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
Leon Thotsky says he has no plans to ever reveal his identity or really take his work beyond the street. Visit our website for more information about where you can see Leon's thoughts in person. They won't be featured in an exhibit anytime soon. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, Deerfield-based Walgreens is selling its international drugstore chain. That and more business headlines from Cranes. Negotiations over Chicago's new ward map remain deadlocked, despite a rare Sunday session. We have the latest. Chicago's South and West Side businesses will soon share up to $14.4 million from city grants. And calls for federal charges against former police officer Jason Van Dyke are growing. Activists lay out their demands as he's set to be released from prison. But first, some more of today's top stories. Mayor Lori Lightfoot and other city leaders got together for a public safety meeting in West Rogers Park this evening after 6 synagogues and Jewish businesses were targeted with spray-painted swastikas and broken windows over the weekend. Chicago police say a suspect in some of the incidents is in custody. Mayor Lori Lightfoot condemned the, quote, troubling rise in anti-Semitism here and nationwide earlier today.
I'm a black female lesbian, and I know that when they are coming after my brothers and sisters in the Jewish community, they got a list, and I'm also on it. And so we have to stand united wherever we see hate, wherever we see anti-Semitism.
CPS has lost 100,000 students over the last 20 years. That's the finding by the group Kids First Chicago. The report found that in 2000, CPS enrollment was more than 430,000 students. Today, it's just slightly more than 330,000. Researchers found the 3 drivers of the decline were the declining birth rate, slowing immigration of Latino families, and a higher out-migration of black families. Approximately 1/3 of CPS's budget comes from state funding, and the amount the district gets is based on prior year's enrollment. Individual school budgets are also tied to the number of students that each school serves. And with families struggling with skyrocketing heating bills, lawmakers are being asked to dump a natural gas surcharge. AARP and other so-called good government lobbying groups say the extreme cold this winter has affected low-income families with higher bills. The 2013 surcharge was implemented to pay for pipe replacement, but some lawmakers think it's time to end the surcharge, which can cost up to $150 per year. In December, 17% of People's Gas customers were behind on their bills by a total of $77 million. Deerfield-based Walgreens is taking bids for its international drugstore company, Boots. Boeing makes a $450 million investment in air taxis, and one of Chicago's most prominent black-owned financial firms announces a deal with BMO. Here to go behind the headlines is Crane Chicago business editor Ann Dwyer. Ann, welcome back. So, Deerfield-based Walgreens starting the sales process for its Boots International drugstore. Who are the potential bidders, and what's the valuation here?
Well, the potential buyers aren't other drugstore or retail players, Brandis, and that tells you something, I think, about the lay of the land in retailing nowadays. We're mostly talking about private equity and buyout companies, the likes of Sycamore Partners, KKR, Bain Capital, and CVC Partners. Now, none of these are exactly household names here in the U.S., but all of them have been active in the M&A scene, including in the European retail and grocery space. Observers think Boots could fetch as much as $9.5 billion in today's market. So it's the beginning of the end of a multinational combination that's only been a few years in the making.
Wow. Okay. So Boeing investing $450 million in Whisk. That's an air taxi startup. First, briefly remind us of the idea behind air taxis and what makes the industry seem like a good investment for Boeing.
Well, it may sound like sort of a Flash Gordon type idea, Brandis, but big companies across several industries actually are investing in this space right now. We're talking about autonomous air taxis. The idea is they whisk people from airports to central business districts. Now, the concept may be about 5 years away from being actual reality, but the idea is that you hop into one of these little vehicles and they take you along a preset route from one vertical takeoff and landing strip to another. Now, Boeing just sank significant money into Whisk, one of these startups, $450 million. And they're not the only one that's investing in this type of activity here in Chicago. United Airlines has been active in this space as well. They are a big backer of a rival startup called Archer Aviation. And I think that Boeing and United see potential to the need to connect people better to central business districts, to get around traffic, And a lot of people are very excited about the prospects in this sector.
So yeah, I'll be curious to see how that turns out in perhaps 4 or 5 years.
I'll be curious to see you ride one.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see me ride one as well, and we'll get on it together. Okay, just a few seconds. Chicago's Loop Capital has closed a deal with a unit of the Toronto-based BMO Financial Group. What does this mean for that financial firm?
Mainly, it means that they're expanding from their long-standing municipal finance business into the business of asset management, basically managing money for wealthy clients. This deal to buy a $6.2 billion asset management firm owned by BMO Harris's parent is a major expansion for Loop Capital and really brings them into the upper tier of financial firms in Chicago.
Okay, that's it from Cranes. Editor Ann Dwyer, thanks as always for joining us.
Thanks, Brandis.
Negotiations over a new ward map that'll shape Chicago politics for the next decade remain deadlocked after a rare Sunday session. City council members failed to resolve the racially polarized debate that's only grown more fraught during the past month. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. So Heather, we know yesterday's meeting, it was live streamed, but otherwise closed to members of the public and the news media. But what happened? What came out of yesterday's meeting?
Not much. We are essentially still in the same place as we were back when this debate really got started in October, with the Black and Latino caucuses really, as you said, deadlocked over how the balance of political power at City Hall will be divided after the 2020 census found that Chicago's Black population continues to drop while Chicago's Latino population continues to rise.
So last week, we spoke with a few aldermen on the end game to a new ward map, including Alderman Gilbert Villegas, leader of the Latino caucus. Here's what he had to say.
We've been very consistent on making sure that we've been following the data, the Voting Rights Act, as well as listening to the residents of Chicago. And that's what we've done based on hearings. And so I hope that there's an opportunity to get there. But if not, ultimately, there's the referendum.
And Heather, remind us again what both caucuses are hoping for.
Well, remapping is essentially a zero-sum game. The Black Caucus has agreed to support a map that has 16 wards with a majority of Black voters and one ward that has a plurality of Black voters. However, the Latino Caucus is insisting upon a map that has 15 wards with a majority of Latino voters, and you just can't draw a map that makes both caucuses happy. So without a clear solution, somebody is either going to have to give up what they have been insisting upon for months and give up a significant amount of power at City Hall, or it will be up to Chicago voters to decide in that referendum we heard Alderman Villegas talk about, and that would be in June when we all go to the polls to also vote for Democratic and Republican nominees for governor and other statewide offices.
Okay, so I'm sure you'll be keeping an eye on that. You'll let us know if it's something Chicagoans need to vote on later on. Heather Sharon, thanks as always.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website, WTTW.com/news. Neighbors in North Lawndale will see a massive new $38.4 million industrial complex said to generate up to 700 jobs. The city says the complex, along with a pair of community innovation centers, will revitalize 21 acres of city-owned land as part of the mayor's Invest Southwest initiative. Here's Mayor Lightfoot making the announcement today.
We are here. This is a city that deserves investment, and look at all the resources that we have here, both in terms of businesses, VC investment, as well as a great workforce that is ready, willing, and able to make businesses successful here in the city of Chicago.
And joining us to discuss the initiative and its impact are Annie Smith, Executive Officer of Angel of God Resource Center, a vocational school in Morgan Park, and Alderman Anthony Beal of the 9th Ward in the far south side. Thanks to you both for joining us. So, Annie, as a part of this, the Invest Southwest initiative, because lots of other organizations, businesses around the city are receiving separate grant funding, your organization is receiving $250,000. Tell us about the Angel of God Resource Center first. What do you all do?
The Angel God Resource Center is a non-for-profit 501c3 organization providing job training and placement team reach. We're a vocational school. We're veteran approved. We have multiple credentials providing services to the Roseland, Morgan Park, and surrounding communities.
And how do you plan to use this grant funding? How is it going to benefit the people you work with?
Well, we have a facility already at 10810, and we will be expanding our services. We will be building on that land that we have, where we will bring in 8 commercial businesses, expand our current services. We will be able to create more jobs. We will have jobs in the part-time market, full-time, and through the construction process.
And Alderman Beal, give us a quick explanation of the Invest Southwest program, please, and what it does.
Well, that's a good question. I've been trying to understand the whole Invest Southwest program since it was launched. A lot of the initial meetings were done outside of working with the aldermen here in the city of Chicago, and it was a very strategic move to work outside of the aldermen, and I don't see how you can get anything done not working with the alderman who has the pulse of the community. And so I can tell you, the Invest Southwest has been a disaster here on the far south side because I've been really butting heads with the administration and the commissioner on the vision, even though we've invested over $1 billion and created over 1,600 jobs out here in the Roseland-Pullman community. And the commissioner has only been here for a little over 2 years. And, he's coming in trying to really tell us what we need instead of listening to the community about what we already have in place and the plan that we have in place in order to get things done. And I think we've done a good job of doing that.
Alderman, tell me about that plan and what you would like to see, because I'm understanding that you don't believe this is working out, this relationship over this particular initiative between you and the mayor. What would you like to see?
Well, what I would like to see is, the commissioner listen to the alderman who has the pulse of their community. We've tried to, over the last couple of years, we've tried to have meetings with the commissioner and to move forward with the vision that, we've put in place, and it's just like hitting our head up against a brick wall. And so what needs to happen is the commissioner just needs to understand our community, because he's from Detroit. And he doesn't understand every corner of the community, and he's coming in trying to tell us what's best for our community instead of understanding that we already have a great program in place out here in the 9th Ward in the Roseland-Pullman community. All the jobs that we've created, all the investment that we've made. I think, with the Pullman National Monument, with the Ross, the Planet Fitness, the Community Center, the industrial, we brought Amazon in, we brought S.C. Johnson in, we brought Whole Food Distribution Center in. And so all those things are taking place. We have a new Culver's that's in. And so all these things are happening, and all these jobs are being created. And for the commissioner to basically tell us, what's best for our community when we're already doing well, and the community is in support of what we've been accomplishing.
Annie, what do you think? Because you're a beneficiary of this initiative, why do you think something like this is necessary?
Well, I think the fact that we have had some success in terms of working in the community. Alderman Beal's office, we worked with the Chambers of Commerce through your group in some capacities, and then we worked with Alderman Kerry Austin and other people in the community. And the hands-on services that we provide has made a difference, but we could do better, as the Alderman said, in terms of networking and making sure that the higher ups in other areas know what we're doing and what is still needed in this community. And there are still much services that's needed in this community. We are going to expand upon the success we already have, aldermen and everyone that's present. And these funds will help us to beautify the areas that we already have, take the land to build up on it, and fill the gaps where some of the needs are right here on the Halsted Street side.
And Alderman, before we let you go, obviously it sounds like you need a better relationship with the administration, but what particular sorts of projects or investment would you like to see in the 9th Ward?
Well, I will tell you right now, with everything that we've done, we have a great relationship that we launched about 1.5 years ago with AAU, which is the largest youth organization in the world. And, we need a hotel like nobody's business. With all the activity that we have, I need a very upscale hotel right here in the Roseland-Pullman community, because we have the tourists that are coming in for the National Monument. We have people coming in for the big sporting events and things like that. And we've already created a place for the people to eat. Now we need a place for them to sleep, so we can keep that money flowing throughout the community. And if we keep that money in the community and keep it flowing, I think that's how we continue to grow our community. And so, we're going to continue to work with all our partners, and, and we look forward to, working with our partners over there, even on the Halsted Street side, that's in the 34th Ward. And so we want to bring everybody together, but it just takes listening to the community, listening to the local elected officials, and that's how you get things done here in the city of Chicago.
All right, the work continues, of course. 9th Ward Alderman Anthony Beal and Annie Smith, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Up next, a look at the demands for federal charges against former police officer Jason Van Dyke in a conversation that first aired on Saturday's Chicago Tonight Black Voices. But first, this week's forecast. Former Chicago officer Jason Van Dyke is scheduled to be released from prison Thursday after serving 3 years behind bars. That's less than half of the nearly 7-year prison sentence he was given in 2019 for second-degree murder in the shooting death of teenager Laquan McDonald. Community activists and relatives of McDonald are now calling on the federal government to take action, demanding the Justice Department bring charges against Van Dyke for violating McDonald's civil rights. Joining us now with more are Tony Thedford, a criminal defense attorney in Chicago, Jasmine Salas with the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and William Calloway, a community activist who's been on the forefront of demonstrations protesting Van Dyke's upcoming release. We also reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office to ask about the federal charges. They declined to comment. William, let's start with you, please. Van Dyke served time for the charges that were brought by the state, but why do you think he should also face federal charges?
It's clear that Jason Van Dyke, under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 242, Jason Van Dyke violated Laquan McDonald's civil rights. Therefore, he should be prosecuted on a federal level. The punishment that he received by being handed down this light sentence of 81 months does not match the criminal act that he committed on October 20th, 2014. And furthermore, there's individuals in Cook County Jail that are spending more time in detention waiting to go to trial than what Jason Van Dyke has spent in the Illinois State Penitentiary.
William, briefly clarify for us why you believe his civil rights, Laquan McDonald's civil rights, were violated.
The deprivation of rights under the color of law is a federal criminal offense. And your viewers can research that more, but that charge is what's applicable to the criminal act that was Jason Van Dyke did.
Jasmine, the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, you all are joining this call for federal charges. How are you working to get the attention of the U.S. Attorney here?
Well, so right now we're focusing on mobilizing our base of supporters as well as Black and brown folks all over Chicago. This is a cause that is extremely important. We all know that 81 months is not enough to fully hold Van Dyke accountable, and we know that there is a movement in this city that is the reason why Van Dyke is behind bars. So we are reactivating that movement. We are, of course, sending the letter to the Attorney General as well as to the Department of Justice, not just around the Van Dyke case, but around 49 other cases of police violence and police murders that have occurred in this city. And so right now we're saying that Van Dyke needs to be held accountable as well as the other killer cops who are out there committing crimes and acting as Van Dyke did on that night that he murdered Laquan.
Tony Thedford, in your legal opinion, what are the chances of federal charges being brought in this case?
Well, it's a matter of choice, it's not a matter of chances. I think the easiest way to equate this is going back years to the Rodney King incident back in the early 90s. The officers were tried in state court that had abused Rodney King. They were acquitted. The U.S. attorney in that district believed that that was an injustice, so they charged them and tried them federally for civil rights violations, and each of those officers were convicted and spent time in a federal penitentiary. That's kind of the equivalent of this. In fact, there is a trial happening right now in Minneapolis. The co-defendants of the other officers who were present when Derek Chauvin took the life of George Floyd. Those officers are being tried in federal court for civil rights violations. William was correct in terms of the section of the federal code that addresses the ability to charge one federally. In this circumstance, it really will come down to the choices made by U.S. Attorney's Office.
Of course. And just a few slight differences. You mentioned the Rodney King case. Those officers were acquitted entirely in state court. And in the instance of the 3 officers in Minnesota, they are still facing state charges as well. And of course, we know former officer Derek Chauvin was convicted in state court. William versus, in this case, Officer Van Dyke was also convicted in state court. William, you're also calling on the Mag Mile Association to stand in solidarity with activists in calling for these federal charges as well. What are you hoping to accomplish by getting the association to participate?
I had a meeting a little bit, I want to say a few days after we approached the Mag Mile and asked them for their help with President Kimberly Bears, and it was a great conversation. She definitely heard the concerns of the community, but we laid it out. We understand that the Mag Mile Association is an affluent retail corridor that has a lot of businesses from Louis, Burberry, Gucci, and these institutions and these establishments should speak up. They should speak out. And we don't want to be reactive. We don't want to wait till it's a possible civil unrest occur because it's misplaced anger in the community and the city explodes. We want to make sure that the Magnificent Mile uses everything or does everything that they can in their influence. We're using their voice, using the network, using their resources to make sure that the Department of Justice understand that Jason Van Dyke is a hazard to the Black community and to the community at large, and he should not be released.
And we also reached out to the Mag Mile Association, but we haven't received a response as of yet. So, Tony, Van Dyke was sentenced on the second-degree murder conviction, which carries a max sentence of 20 years. But he was also convicted on 16 counts of aggravated battery, 1 count for each of the 16 shots against McDonald. Each count carries up to 30 years. So, Tony, how did he end up getting 7 years, and he's serving less than half of that time?
Well, what happens is that when there is a criminal conviction, and let's remember that a jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. They could have found him guilty of first-degree murder, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. But they did not. And again, this is no critique of the jury. I think that they made a choice based on what was in front of them. And they found him guilty of each of those 16 shots, a finding for each individual count. So that was hefty and a potential of a very heavy sentence. However, what happens is that those charges merged into what would have been the murder conviction. Because the murder conviction was second degree, that second-degree murder conviction essentially takes precedent in terms of sentencing. So again, this court found that those charges should merge into the second-degree murder count, thus giving him a maximum sentence of 20 years at 50%. You mentioned earlier that he was being released after only serving half of his sentence. I will say that any defendant in that situation would only serve 50% of their sentence because that, in fact, is the law in Illinois for a conviction of second-degree murder.
Jasmine, in this world that we're in now, post-George Floyd, when the social justice and the movement for racial equity has been hastened, do you think this sentence would be different had this occurred after George Floyd?
I think that's a real possibility, Candace. I think definitely the uprising was the largest protest movement ever in our country's history. And it was in response to a lynching of a Black man. And I think a lot of people saw that footage of George Floyd losing his life, and they were spurred to take action. And I think even though that movement has died down, people's consciousness and people's feelings towards police impunity is the same.
We'll have to leave it there. My thanks to William Calloway, Jasmine Salas, and Tony Thedford for joining us. Back with more Chicago Tonight right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
A note before we go tonight. Very sad news here in the WTTW and WFMT family. Our longtime building manager, Don Muse, died on Sunday, surrounded by his family. Over the past 35 years, our staff knew and trusted Don for the big things and the little things. Don was a force, his work ethic unmatched, his care for the place where we work supreme, his heart enormous. The title of building manager doesn't adequately describe the scope of his responsibilities. Don quite literally worked morning, noon, and night, sometimes 7 days a week, to keep the building that we work in up and running safely. Don Muse, thanks for everything. Our thoughts tonight are, of course, with the Muse family and Don's many, many friends. And that is our show for this Monday night. Please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Rising water levels are taking over Chicago's shoreline, so what's the city's plan to protect it? And the artistry of miniature interiors in the style of the Thorn Rooms at the Art Institute. And please join me tonight in just a few minutes for our next Chicago Tonight Black Voices virtual community conversation. We're talking about efforts to keep the story of Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley alive. I'll be joined by Till's cousin and 2 others who are helping with efforts to share the story. Again, that's tonight at 8. Visit WTTW.com/events to RSVP. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.